If you are interested in setting up floating collections in your library, there are a few settings in LS2 preferences to consider. To get started, you need to designate specific holdings codes and participating locations. If this is your first attempt with floating collections, think about starting with a specific collection, such as video games, to test the waters and see how borrowers respond, and give system administrators time to determine the best way to manage the number of titles at each location. Now let's take a look at two areas in LS2 preferences that you need to set up for floating collections: location setup and holdings codes. Decide if you want to consider a certain threshold for a particular holdings code before you return items to the main location. Location setup. Under Location Setup Defaults Details, select the Allow Floating Collections checkbox. When you select this option, the Email a Notification when Item Threshold is Exceeded checkbox displays. When this checkbox is selected, two additional fields display. Type the email address of the person in the recipient's email address box who wants to be notified once the threshold exceeds the number in the item threshold box. Under the item threshold box, enter the number for the threshold limit. You must enable the setting Allow Floating Collections for a location before the holdings code can be set up to float for that location. Holdings codes. Under Types and Codes, Holdings Codes, set up the holdings code you want to use for your floating collection. Add a new holdings code or edit an existing one. Remember, any holdings code participating in a floating collection must have the same short description at every location. Select the Allow Floating checkbox. If you attempt to enable the Allow Floating checkbox and the selected location was not previously set up under Location Setup, Defaults, Details, an error displays. To activate floating for a holdings code, you must first activate floating for the location. One public report in LS2 reports is available entitled Floating Items, providing a list of items floated by location type, location, and date range.